Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, well, it's all happening in Canada as pressure mounts to declare a state of national emergency over India's transnational repression. Just as Premier Abbey of BC is blasted by the community for outright lying. Meanwhile, in India, has the RSS just taken another big step to cement their hold over the nation and turn it into its hoped-for Hindu Rashtra, as accusations of establishing a new era of Hindu apartheid appear? The latest report is out here in the UK that shows Sikh fears are at a record high. Well, is anyone surprised? We'll have more details on that report in a moment. And we'll pay tribute to a few members of the community who've recently hit the headlines in a most positive way. All this and more on today's show, and of course at the end of the show we'll take a look at loads of great comments, so do stay tuned for that. Right, loads to get through this morning, so let's get underway. Okay, my first story. This is, of course, moving to Canada. Yesterday, the Surrey City Council in British Columbia unanimously passed a motion urging the federal government to declare a national state of emergency to combat this violent surge in organised extortion, this massive rise of violent crime that we've been talking about on a regular basis. So the council itself argued that the crisis, and one of the RCMP officers got in trouble just the other day, as I reported, for saying there's no crisis. What crisis? It has been argued as a crisis. It's characterised, of course, by these drive-by shootings, intimidation that's been reported, and, of course, these transnational criminal syndicates in the form of Lawrence Bishnoi gang. It's, as they claim, look, it's exceeded the capacity of our local and even provincial law enforcement. We need help, basically. That's why they're trying to declare a national emergency. So they've asked the federal government, under this motion that was introduced by the local mayor, a lady called Brenda Locke, who's been very heavily involved in all this. She's a very high-profile figure, particularly trying to call out the terrorist activities of the Bishnoi gang in her area. Now, these calls that she's made from the federal government include, we want more emergency powers. She's trying to invoke a federal state of emergency, or, as she calls it, equivalent extraordinary measures, to grant temporary powers to dismantle organised extortion networks. Now, we know that, of course, the Bishnoi gang has been declared as a terrorist organisation. Well, and as part of that designation, extra resources will then be channelled to fight the Bishnoi gang. So she's actually asking for even more temporary powers to do something more about this. She's also asking for a national commissioner. And this is the appointment of someone whose job title would officially be Commissioner for Extortion, Violence Against Canadians. And big title, but basically the job role will be to coordinate a nationwide response across police and government agencies. As we often say, these things can only be fought because these things, basically the Bishnoi gang is a multinational, it transcends borders. You need to meet fire with fire. If it's a transnational group, you need to have a transnational response. You need to coordinate not just in the state of in BC, but nationally and actually arguably internationally with, of course, US law enforcement. And to speed up deportations. So she's calling for the rapid removal of non-citizens charged or convicted of extortion, firearms offences or participation in related criminal activity. Again, that's a pretty obvious one. And then, of course, just to help give the RCMP, the local Royal Canadian, I can't even say it, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, to give them reinforcements. So this is to deploy immediately additional RCMP personnel and resources, and particularly resources to tackle organised crime and more intelligence resources. Now, we do know there have been already this year alone, we're only on, was it 28th of January, 29th of January today, 35 suspected extortion incidents already this year. That's more than one a day. That includes 8 shootings. And this is gathering pace faster than certainly last year, the 132 cases reported last year. So it's getting worse. And, of course, officials are emphasising this fact that it is transnational in nature. These crimes are often orchestrated, as we know, by syndicates, criminal syndicates like the Bishnoi gang, coming from outside Canada. And therefore, it requires federal intervention in areas like immigration, border security, etc. Now, in amongst all this, I did come across, and I didn't realise this, I missed this a few days ago, but I want to show you, this is a video of one of the key characters that has been one of the main protagonists in our story when we cover Canadian extortion rackets. This is BC's Premier, David Eby. And you will recall a few days ago, we reported the story of the Globe newspaper in Canada, the Global News, discovered through I forget the instrument. Anyway, it's a way of Freedom of Information Act, we call it here in the UK, the Canadian equivalent. They actually managed to get hold of a leaked report which highlighted the fact that the RCMP and law enforcement in general, obviously presumably in links with CSIS, the intelligence agency, they have unequivocally pointed evidence to the fact that the Bishnoi gang and other gangs like it are being orchestrated by the Indian government. So this is known intelligence that has been reported to the Canadian government, Mark Carney, but also David Eby will be aware of this, the Premier of BC. With that in mind, of course, he still went to India, to Mumbai, to tie up trade deals, even knowing this report has told him and all his government colleagues that the country that you are shaking hands with, that you're tying trade deals up, are responsible for murdering your citizens on your soil. Here's when that report was leaked and released and hit mainstream news. This is his response. Listen to this. Talking about weasel words from a politician.
I heard the reports literally on the first day that we were here. I was incredibly concerned. In the lead up to this trip, we were extremely careful about trying to understand as best as we could with the information that was shared with us about the relationship between India and Canada and allegations that have been made and so on. I had briefings from the Ministry of National Defence of Canada. I had briefings from CSIS. I had briefings and multiple exchanges at the staff and at my level with the Government of Canada. And so thought I had a very good handle on what the potential issues were. And so when I heard that report, I was concerned. I asked staff to get a copy of it. It turned out to be a 3-page briefing note. And the paragraph in question that was cited in the initial news report was a summary of publicly available news articles from the October 2024 period, allegations we were aware of. They were very fully canvassed at the time, citing to news outlets like Al Jazeera. This was not an RCMP intelligence report. And I guess my frustration is, there is a serious issue and we don't know where it's going to go. It's at a criminal trial process. There may be revelations there that are very concerning. There may not, but that process is underway right now. That is where it is going to be resolved. In terms of where we're going, we need to ensure justice for Mr. Najjar, for his family, for the community, and that process plays out. And at the same time, we can't sit around while our standard of life is eroded and our economy is eroded by the decisions of the President of the United States. India is going to be the 3rd largest economy in the world, and Canadians and British Columbians will only benefit from a close relationship with India that includes mutual respect between the two countries for our sovereignty and for our concerns, which are on both sides about issues back and forth between the two countries, and those are being resolved at the federal level. So this is very delicate stuff. I want to be clear that the report that I have seen, that was the subject of the global report, was a summary of publicly available news reports from more than a year ago. So that's where we're at on that. I look forward to the resolution of the criminal trial process, people being held accountable as necessary. And in the meantime, we are here in India meeting with companies and with individuals that are very glad to see us and for whom we will be able to do and with whom we will be able to do a lot of work to benefit British Columbians.
Just where to begin. This is why we have such a low opinion of politicians like this. Of course they're pleased to see you in India because they know they've got away with murder, literally. This guy is unbelievable. He's sat there and everything that's come out of his mouth has just been weasel words, apart from the fact that half of what he said is absolute nonsense. This classified RCMP report that he just dismissed, and there's a whole load of deflection there. Trump's tariffs, we need to do this because of Trump's tariffs. Let's blame the big orange bogeyman over the border. Completely deflecting from the reality here, as he's basically deliberately ignoring a report. This report that he just said, it's historic, it's rubbish, It said it's one paragraph. This is totally untrue. It was a security assessment that basically destroyed the Indian government's line of plausible deniability. In other words, as we said before, India has been able to plausibly deny it's murdering Canadians on Canadian soil because it's nothing to do with us. This report contradicts that. This report says access via this, it's access to information it's called, explicitly states that the Bishnoi gang, already designated as a terrorist group in September last year, is, quote, acting on behalf of the Indian government. The report mentions this link a half dozen times in 3 pages, not one paragraph, as he said. The political fallout, basically, of all this is centred around Ebi. Of course, he's sitting there, and the report recorded that message from his hotel room in Mumbai. And he dismissed it as, quote, summary of publicly available news articles from 2024. This is rubbish. It was immediately debunked by the World Sikh Organisation, amongst many, which said that the document was a classified assessment and specifically referenced Ebi's own June 2025 request for the gang's terrorist listing, meaning the report was current intelligence. It wasn't a history lesson or a collection of news reports. It was an actual intelligence document. And of course, it just highlights once again this terrible, dangerous rift that's developed. And it's not just Canada, but certainly here it highlighted in Canada, between Canadian intelligence, which identifies a genuine sovereign threat, and Canadian politicians who just are happy to suppress that intelligence for the sake of trade deals. So the RCMP report, their assessment, it actually just showed a really dangerous blueprint of how the Indian state under Hindutva is, as we say, outsourcing its violence, its terrorism. By using the Bishnoi gang, Delhi is attempting to deliberately bypass international law and diplomatic norms. And the gang, and we've talked about the history of the gang many times, it started in student politics in Punjab, but it has allegedly over 700 members worldwide. And this sort of gang war narrative that the Govt media is using to mask what they talk about this gang warfare. It's not gang warfare. They're lying. The Govt media are basically covering up state-sponsored assassinations, terrorism. So this report confirmed that the group is driven by financial gain, but is operating under the direction of Indian agents, obviously targeting particularly Sikh community and Khalistanis. And it's central, of course. I mean, the evidence, we know this for a fact because in October of 2024, 6 Indian diplomats were thrown out after the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and Sukhdev Singh, amongst other activities. That was under the Trudeau regime. So India has clearly weaponised its criminal justice system. Bishnoi, despite being in a Gujarat jail for over 10 years now, is continuing to run a global hit squad from a jail cell in India, which implies, just through logic, his incarceration is actually state protected or state protecting his operational base to go out to countries like Canada and murder Khalistanis. So this is once again showing a political class represented by people like Ebi and people like Mark Carney pivoting towards India. And the deflection was in this interview. Oh, it's to battle against the orange bogeyman, Donald Trump, south of the border. Interestingly, Mark Carney gave, I have to say, a magnificent speech in Davos a few days ago. He talked about the New World Order. And if you haven't watched that speech, do watch it. I'm no fan of Carney, as regular viewers know. But his speech, it talked about this New World Order where the old international rules-based order has basically exploded. But this New World Order sees India as a critical third largest economy and a reliable partner for minerals and energy. That's basically what he said. And sadly, in some ways, that is true. But for the Sikh community, it's a basic betrayal. It's a betrayal of the fundamental duty of their government to protect them. And the RCMP's warning that the Bishnoi gang creates a climate of fear and intimidation is just being treated as secondary to a $1.3 billion annual exports to India. It's all about money over lives, over human rights. And by tiptoeing around this source of the threat, the Indian state, people like Abiy and Carney and so on are effectively saying to the world, but particularly to India, that transnational oppression, it's okay. You can do this. But the World Sikh Organisation, amongst every other organisation in the Sikh community, have been very loud about this. They said, look, if you refuse to name the root of the problem, even when CSIS and RCMP are warning you who's behind it, you're essentially handing a licence to kill to RAW, to the NIA. Come and kill our citizens because you'll get away with it. And so what we're looking at here is definitive proof of a failing democracy of India. When somebody like India, which calls itself regularly the mother of democracy, we are the world's largest democracy, when it basically uses proxy killers to murder citizens of other sovereign nations, from basically orchestrated from one of their own jail cells, it stops being a nation that's run by the rule of law. It becomes basically a terrorist state, a mafia state. No, mafia is the wrong word. That implies criminality. It's a terrorist state. Let's call it for what it is. The RCMP is doing what it is. It's doing its job. The CSIS is doing their job. They've given us the what, the who, the why behind it. But ultimately, it's the politicians are failing. The key question, so what? So what do we do about it? It's the politicians that are failing that question. What do we do about it? And Abiy, his interview here in Mumbai, it's a masterclass in political cowardice. To stand out there in Mumbai and dismiss a protected that's what it's called, basically an intelligence national security document as old news, it's an insult to every Sikh family in British Columbia and indeed across the whole of Canada. It's basically he's fired his own bullet through their windows. Basically, Abiy, once again, like Carney, is choosing trade, the mining sector, all these things that he's trying to tie deals up with, over the lives of the very people who elected him. They're weaponising trade. The Indian government knows that as long as they offer trillions in investment, they offer this huge market of 1.4 billion people, they can basically buy silence over the assassination of Canadian citizens. And the good news is, the narrative shifting. We're no longer complaining about it. We're showing the evidence every day that I sit here and I show stuff like this. We're highlighting to more and more people the truth. And the fact is, this document was leaked during his trip, shows a massive internal struggle that must be going on within the Canadian state. I talk about this battle, essentially the intelligence community are doing their job, but they must be getting tired of seeing the work that they're doing being ignored by people like this, chasing trade deals. And we've got to ask that question. If the Bishnoi gang is acting on behalf of the Indian government, as clearly they are, then every trade deal that we sign with New Delhi is basically a contract signed with the handlers of the killers of our own citizens. There's no middle ground here. You can't be a partner in trade while being a perpetrator of terror. And we go back to 1984. The Indian state's memory is very long, but its tactics are becoming more and more desperate. This is why the Khalistan movement is growing. They're getting more and more desperate. India has thought they could get away with this, and according to the politicians they are, but ultimately they're not. They can hide behind this plausible deniability, this gangster idea of proxy killers. But people bodies like CSIS, the RCMP, they've peeled back the layers, they've found the truth. And it's basically time now for the politicians to wake up. We're onto you. We know what's going on, and we're now holding you to account. So there you go. Interesting stuff in Canada going on. Let me move on to my next story. This is I have to say quite a concerning story. It's relatively small in scale, the story, but the implications are massive. This is in one of the Himalayan states, UttaraKhand. And again, this word apartheid, it's not very often used with India. And for those of us who are old enough to remember South African apartheid, it's a deeply evil, wicked thing. It literally reshaped the world in many ways in terms of how the world reacted to South African apartheid. It was a desperately evil social structure, racism in its purest form. So the world united, fortunately, to rid apartheid of Africa, South Africa. They recognised the evil for what it was. But we're seeing apartheid, and this word apartheid appearing in India. We often, certainly here in Satellite on Perspectives, I'd certainly call out India's Hindu Rashtra and its drive towards the Rashtra. But this term apartheid is increasingly appearing. And this story basically is highlighting deepening fractures, chasms in India. Now, India has always tried to project this image of we are a secular state. Constitutionally, they are a secular state. But the truth is quite different now. And this is about a temple ban in Uttarakhand. And it's not really just about religious purity. It's about basically the Indian government, the BJP, the RSS. It's ultimately back to the RSS. The RSS are systematically breaking down all the rights of minorities in India. Now, the story is centered around the Badrinath Kedarnath Temple Committee, the BKTC. Now, the BKTC has changed, a very subtle but very important change. They have changed what was before an informal restriction of their holy sites to a rigid and importantly state-backed mandate of exclusion. Basically, they are banning non-Hindus into these holy sites, where before it was, well, there was an informal restriction, but it wasn't, it was pretty relaxed. Suddenly now, state-backed exclusion. This is a Hindus-only zone. No non-Hindus allowed here. And you can see why the term apartheid starts to creep in. It's a coordinated campaign that involves 48 major shrines across the Char Dham circuit, including this Kedarnath and Badrinath. Now, the proposal, and this is why it's state-backed, is backed actually by the BJP MLA, the Member of the Legislative Assembly, Asha Nautial, but also the Chief Minister, Pushkar Singh Dhami. And it's designed to transform these ancient holy sites from inclusive pilgrimage destinations into exclusive places of Sanatan purity, Hindu purity. Now, this is where, again, the RSS, through the BJP, their political arm, are weaponising and abusing the Constitution. I often talk about how the Constitution is being used and abused by the Brahmins. Article 26 of the Indian Constitution allows religious dominations to manage their own affairs. Now, it was brought in very clearly to say that each religion essentially can take charge of its own affairs. In other words, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to put in a constitution. But this has been weaponised and abused by the RSS. They've weaponised this legal framework of a secular republic to enforce religious segregation. It was designed originally just to say, look, each religion can protect itself. But now they've slightly turned it on its head and actually driving this so that we're not just going to protect ourselves, we are deliberately going to exclude everybody else. There's a subtle difference, but an important difference. And they extended this to the 105 Ghats of Haridwar, where the Ganga Sabha has already begun installing, and again, this is where it starts getting very sinister, non-Hindus prohibited banners. Again, think of South Africa apartheid. Non-whites, not allowed here. If you're black, no blacks allowed. Deeply evil. Well, here we're seeing it in India. Non-Hindus prohibited. You imagine that here in the West. If you're sitting in the West, you imagine seeing a sign that says, non-Christians or non-Sikhs prohibited. Or, that's it. You imagine the Sikhs. If we put non-Sikhs prohibited outside a Gurdwara or anywhere, it flies in the face of everything that any decent, normal, civilized human being stands for. And the framing of these sites as spiritual centres, not tourist destinations, it's calculated. It's designed to strip these spaces of their status as public heritage and put them under the total administrative control of RSS-aligned bodies. Basically, they're not tourist locations anymore. They are now signs of RSS supremacy, basically, of Hindu supremacy. And there was non-Hindus not allowed, no tourists, Hindus only, the superior race only allowed. And for decades, these regions were symbols of what's called Pahar cultures. And one of the key characteristics of that was what they call a relative fluidity of faith. It was, it wasn't purity, it wasn't pure Hindu superiority or supremacy. But by declaring these places as Sanatan Pavitra Shihars, sacred Sanatan cities, basically the Indian state, and don't forget this isn't just localized religious leaders saying this, it's backed by the state. The state itself, India, is signaling that the right to exist, to do business, or simply walk through these public spaces is only allowed if you are a Hindu. This is the blueprint. This is the blueprint of the Hindu Rashtra. Basically, where your constitutional rights as an Indian citizen are secondary to your religious beliefs. That's pure Hindutva in its purest form. Again, it's almost Orwellian in its structure. It's basically saying, if you're a Hindu, you get full rights. If you're not a Hindu, no chance. Your human rights are secondary. And the most concerning of all, it's a blatant attempt to exclude or forcibly absorb Sikh identity into this new exclusionary idea. The BKTC chairman, he said that Sikhs, Jains and Buddhists are part of Hinduism under the constitution. So he himself has reiterated this dangerous part of the constitution. This is why the constitution wasn't signed by Sikhs. Under the constitution, Sikhs are seen as a subset of Hinduism. Basically, Sikhs are Hindus. Remember this regular criticism we hear. Sikhs are Hindus. Of course they're not. But under the constitution, they are seen that. And this is recounted again by the chairman of the BKTC. And it basically, again, it just highlights this intent, this apartheid idea that they're trying to roll out. It's basically saying those who don't conform to the RSS-defined Sanatan identity are physically barred, and likewise Sikhs are told that your distinct faith is merely a subset, a subcategory of the majority Hindus. And it stands in direct contradiction of what Sikhi is, which of course rejects that very fundamental part of Hinduism, which is the caste system, the evil of the caste system. And of course, the Brahmanical order, the upper echelons of the caste system, the Brahmins, who essentially run India. Sikh pilgrims have visited places like this for centuries. And they've also, as Sikhs, have found common ground. They've shared reverence with these people, their fellow human beings. It's never been a problem before. It's only in recent times now. Suddenly you see this exclusionary thing, that the barriers coming down. No, non-Hindus not allowed. It's deeply, deeply wicked, and I have to say deeply concerning. So what we're witnessing here in UttaraKhand, and we're going to see this, I'll predict we'll see this increasingly so right across India. It is basically the physical manifestation of the Hindu Rashtra. And it's a state where anybody non-Hindu, you're not just marginalised, but you're basically erased from Indian society. When the BKTC chairman says these shrines are not tourist destinations, which they have been for centuries, he's essentially saying they are no longer public property. He's reclaiming the geography of India for a single narrow ideology of Hindutva. And it's deeply ironic for the Sikh community. The gurus themselves established a principle that I understand was called Sarab Sanja, that the house of God has 4 doors, open to all, regardless of caste, creed, colour, religion, doesn't matter. Everybody's seen as equal. Everybody is welcome into the house of God. Contrast that with the Hindutva ideology, which is putting up these banners, non-Hindus allowed. It's hiring the gatekeepers to check IDs at the banks of a river, basically. This is failing democracy in its purest form. This is a state that's weaponising its own constitution to justify the very discrimination that same constitution was designed to prevent. They have used and abused their very own constitution. What more evidence do you need? Article 26 is, and it was designed particularly, I have to say ironically, and I say this regularly, the Indian constitution was written by Brahmins to protect Brahmins, to maintain Brahmanical control over India. And Article 26 is particularly devious like that. It takes a right meant for minority protection and turns it instead into a weapon for majority dominance, for Hindu dominance. If the state can ban a non-Hindu from a riverbank in Haridwar today, in Uttarakhand, what stops them from saying, okay, we now ban khalistanis or anti-nationals from a marketplace in Amritsar tomorrow? It's setting a precedent, a dangerous set of precedents. And absorbing Sikhs into this Hindu ideology is classic Hindutva. They want Sikh history, the heritage, the culture, everything. Yeah, they want all the good side of Sikhi and claim it as their own. But they don't want Sikh independent sovereignty. That's what they fear. By labelling Sikhs as Sanatanis, they're attempting to basically strip Sikhs of their own distinct political and religious identity. They want a Sikh who bows to the RSS, become absorbed into Hindutva, not a Sikh who stands for Khalistan. So we've got to keep calling this out. This is apartheid wearing an RSS scarf, basically. The diaspora have a responsibility. We have the freedom out here, all of us, including myself, to highlight what's going on there. As I say, this is a relatively small story, but the implication is massive. It's national. It affects the whole of India, this. Fortunately, we can talk about this. We can highlight this here in the diaspora. But you try and call this out in India, good luck to you. It's not about protecting sanctity. This is about a regime that is so insecure in its own identity. I used that word yesterday, insecurity. It's increasing insecurity. It knows, the RSS know they're losing this war, this battle. And they're trying to, through this, and that's generating more insecurity, that it needs to keep building bigger and bigger walls to try and protect itself, to try and project its power. And they're failing. They're really failing this. And as I say, it's this story itself. This is apartheid creeping into India. Why isn't the West calling it out? I am, with my small voice here on Perspectives. But why aren't more and more organisations and people calling out the growing apartheid? And I say this is a dangerous symbol of what is arriving in India. Watch my podcast where we often talk about the rising Nazification of India. This basically is apartheid, Nazification. It's authoritarianism in its purest, most dangerous form. So I say, watch out. And again, this is why, please, if you're in the Punjab, you need more Punjabis to watch shows like myself, just to wake up to understand the truth. Because you won't see this in the Govt media. They won't be telling you non-Hindus allowed until you actually see that banner and you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, let's move on. And I want to contrast this with another little story I picked up related to the 5 taxts. Of course, we have these 5 taxts, these 5 holy seats of Sikhi in India. The Akal tact, of course, being the most senior. But another tact, this is the Patna Sahib Takht. This is another tact, one of the 5, the Panj tact, that have had all sorts of political problems. And again, it comes back to this old story of RSS infiltration, RSS's attempt to try and destroy Sikh organisations from within. And they've been doing it very successfully, whether it's the SGPC or the Shiromani Akali Dal. They've tried very hard in the Akal tact, the most senior of all the tacts. And they're doing it in the Patna Sahib tact. As a result, unsurprisingly, the Sikh community is trying to fight back. And I want to, again, compare and contrast with that last story, non-Hindus allowed in place of Hindu worship. Well, the other front of the RSS attack on the Sikh community and the minorities as a whole is that, again, they're trying to destroy their competitors, the Gurdwaras, the Takts. They're trying to, again, infiltrate and destroy from within. So, of course, the Sikh community is fighting back. And a Sikh watchdog has filed a formal demand to purge 287 non-Sikh voters from the electoral roll of the Takht Sri Harmandir Ji Patna Sahib. So this one of the 5 tacts. So again, you can start to see they've woken up saying, hang on, we've got 287 non-Sikhs actually now voting in our own affairs. Clearly, we know where they're coming from, these non-Sikhs. They argue that the presence of non-Sikh voters allows external political parties, obviously those aligned with Hindutva interests, to influence the management of one of Sikhism's highest seats of authority. Now, the Patna Sahib has long been a flashpoint for internal power struggles. This isn't the first time we've been here. It's usually exacerbated, it's worsened by the Bihar government's interference in board appointments. Yes, of course, Bihar's hit the news a lot recently. We had elections recently in Bihar, became very politically charged, a lot of accusations, particularly against the BJP. But clearly it is a state where the RSS is very active, and they have tried very hard to infiltrate this tact. And the petitioners have stated that there is a need for Sikh institutions to be managed only by those who adhere to the Sikh Report Maryada, as it's called. Basically trying to prevent the vote bank politics that have been a real danger to the tax administration for years. And it's a battle for the soul of Sikh institutions. We do know Hindutva are trying everything they can to use this tactic of divide and rule to infiltrate these organisations, whether it is the Shiromani Akali Dal, the SAD, the SGPC, the tax like this, the Akal tact, and now this particular tact here. It's getting inside and they're fragmenting it, the creating divisions among Sikhs. We reported on this in the past. And these people who infiltrate these RSS plants, or even local political workers who align with Hindutva, if they're allowed to vote in these elections, they're diluting the Panthic vote. They're diluting the genuine voice of the Sikh people. So what's happening here is they're trying to reclaim the roles, the voting rolls, the electoral rolls at the Patna Sahib. And it's so important that they do this. If they cannot control their own tax, how can the community hope to control its own policy making, its own destiny? Because from these tax come the gamatas, the policy statements, etc. And if it's infiltrated by the RSS, then the very core of Sikhi globally, not just in India, globally, this affects the diaspora as much as India itself. The policies that are sent out are not pure. They've been voted on by non-Sikhs. Again, it's horrific. It's being allowed. So again, it's not about exclusion. It's about basically the fundamental right of Sikhs to govern themselves without interference and infiltration from state-sponsored organisations like the RSS, etc. So again, another story just to watch out. It's just highlighting what on earth is going on. It's so dangerous. Right, okay, let's jump all the way back to Europe. And a report was released a few days ago. A report deeply researched into the situation, the state of British Sikhs. It is called the British Sikh Report. It is an insight into the thoughts and feelings of the British Sikh community. And it tells a very worrying story. And I can honestly say, I've no doubt the audience in here in the UK who watch this, you can probably predict exactly what was in this report. It is the 11th annual report. It covers, it's called the 2025 report. It basically covers research done over last year, and it is the latest report released a few days ago. And what it's reporting is a huge surge in anxiety. 54% of British Sikhs now believe they could be misunderstood or directly targeted due to geopolitical tensions involving the Indian government. And again, it's not just a general feeling of unease, it's actually quantifiable, it's measured. The report shows that 60% of Sikhs have little to no trust in the UK government to act in their best interests. And I'm laughing because there we have it. What have I said for so long? How many shows have I sat here and banged on time and time again? The British government is not protecting our Sikh community. Well, here it is. In black and white, in actual metric numbers, 60% of the community, I'm surprised it's only 60%, have little to no trust in the UK government to protect them. And it mirrors a political shift. Support for the Labour Party among Sikhs has plummeted. And this is interesting, from 40% to just 18% in 1 year. And for those outside the UK, the Labour Party, headed by Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, has just plummeted. They are basically the worst government probably in British history, certainly in living memory. Everything they do has just been wrong. I could sit here probably for an hour and recount the treacherous decisions that our government, particularly Keir Starmer, have made, that are not protecting Sikhs, but protecting the British public. The grooming gang scandal, it goes on and on. Anyway, I don't want to go down that side track because you all know, basically, I'm preaching to the converted here. The community. So I want to reiterate that statistic. Plummeted. Sikh support for Labour has plummeted from 40% to just 18%. Don't forget, the Labour government was elected partly because of the support from the Sangha, from the Sikh community. Now, the Sikh community feels that while they contribute billions to the UK economy and have a huge history in the British Armed Forces, a legacy that 81% of respondents still value, they are being treated as expendable chips in the UK-India trade negotiations. So this report just basically says, what on earth I've been saying for so long, that it's all about money. That for the British state, it's more about trade deals than human rights of our massively contributing, entrepreneurial, economically contributing community. The unique fears cited by BSR Chair Jasveer Singh include, this is in the report, rising anti-Sikh hatred and the misrecognition of Sikhs. Of course, I talk about this often, how right-wing idiots out there in the streets who are basically anti-Muslim, trying to find Muslims, see a Sikh and say, oh, he's one of them. And of course, Sikhs are becoming the collateral damage in this war of the right wing against the Islamic community. But even though that's happening, and the government know that's happening, there is no specific protection coming from the government. We know the Muslim community keeps getting millions of pounds of investment to build protection around their mosques, etc., resources to prevent hate crimes against the Islamic community. Where is the equivalent for the Sikh community? And this report highlights that very fact. Now, of course, the report highlights the root of this. It's transnational oppression coming from the Indian state. So again, no ambiguity here. This is a report telling the British government where it's coming from, the same government you're shaking hands with trade deals. Now, a recent documentary, and I did cover this at the time, it was a Bloomberg documentary, but also parliamentary evidence suggests that British intelligence, through GCHQ, MI5, MI6, they have intercepted calls as early as July 2023 discussing, quote, the elimination of 3 primary targets: Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, Gurpatan Singh Panoon, and Avtar Singh Kandar. Avtar Singh Kandar, of course, died suspiciously here in the UK just before Hardeep Singh Nijjar. When Nijjar was assassinated, and it came out that Panoon was a target of a thwarted plot, they were caught before they could do it. Avtar Singh Kandar died suddenly in a hospital here in Birmingham, in the Midlands, in June 2023. Now, despite a forensic pathologist report stating that poisoning by exotic substances couldn't be ruled out, West Midlands Police and the British government consistently refuse to hold a proper, full judicial inquiry, despite the fact that the family's barrister, Michael Polak, is doing his damnedest to try and get one instituted. But of course, the British government are not doing it. They're dragging their feet deliberately over this. The Sikh Federation, for example, currently pressuring Security Minister Dan Jarvis to come clean on why this intelligence was reportedly withheld from the community and why Indian agents linked to the Indian High Commission continue to operate with impunity, calling activists to warn them that unknown men will be sent to their homes. These are the same operatives, the RAW or NIA operatives, telling Sikhs in our community, Khalistanis, unknown men will come to your home. In other words, threatening them. And of course, you've got the Govt media whipping all this up as well. And it goes on. So this, the report's huge. I can't go through it in too much detail. But the report basically, it's a State of the Union report for the Sikh diaspora in the UK. It's a wake-up call. We're seeing a classic failing democracy situation here. Not India, but in the UK. when over 500,000 strong community, our Sikh diaspora here in the UK, feels unsafe, as evidenced by this report, because of actions of a foreign power, and our own government does nothing about it, that government has basically wiped its hands clean of its main responsibility, the protection of its own citizens. UK's silence over Avtar Singh Kandar, contrast that with what happens in Canada and the US. It's shameful, and I do rant about this regularly. Westminster is just tiptoeing around Delhi. It's tying up trade deals, free trade agreement, the FTA. It's saying, yeah, look what we've signed. But what it's essentially telling British Sikhs is, your safety is worthless. Your safety is worth less than a deal on whiskey or car parts. You take your pick. It doesn't matter. This is why the trust has disappeared. This is why Labour has dropped from 40% to 18% in support in the community. You can't expect a community to feel British when you treat their assassins as strategic partners. Indian government strategy is very clear. They want to export the fear that they use to control Punjab into London and Birmingham. They're using the same tactics, exporting the same tactics to here in the UK. It astonishes me. But the good news is, India's overplayed their hand. By targeting the diaspora, they've globalised the Khalistan issue. It's this wonderful law of unintended consequences I often talk about. The very repression that they're using to try and silence Sikhs and Khalistanis has actually proven the case for Khalistan. If the world's largest democracy, India, is so scared of holding a referendum that it needs to send hit squads to London, to Birmingham, to Canada, BC, to New York, it's already lost the argument. British Sikhs, amongst Sikhs around the diaspora, are realising the only true security lies in their own sovereignty. Basically, what they're saying is we need Khalistan, and India are doing the recruitment for the Khalistan movement. Very clear. Okay, gosh, the clock is mounting down. Let me. I just want to quickly cover then a few quick stories here. This is sad, but I suppose courageous and heroic in another way. This is a Canadian Sikh. He's from Brampton. This guy, Mandeep Singh. He died in action in Ukraine in October 2024. He's the only Sikh Canadian to have made the ultimate sacrifice in the Ukraine conflict. He's just been awarded the Ukrainian Canadian Sacrifice Medal for his service as a volunteer soldier. And his family has said his mission was driven by the Sikh duty to defend the oppressed. Vand Chako. So, it's, gosh, what can you say about this? I mean, again, it's just, we know the martial heritage, this great, heroic, historical, cultural, almost genetic ability to be great soldiers. This guy has given the ultimate sacrifice. He felt that Ukraine against the Russian bear was the oppressed, the persecuted. So he's done what clearly his genes have driven him to do, to protect those vulnerable in the ultimate way. And he's flown out to Ukraine and he's sacrificed his life over it. So again, a huge tribute to this young lad. Again, he was just a Sikh from Brampton in British Columbia. But well done to him. And then just quickly flick through to the first turbaned Sikh warden. So I do like to just highlight guys or ladies, of course, from the Sikh community who have reached high-profile positions, because these are important, because they send such an important message to the young. You can break the barriers. There are basically no barriers to you succeeding, to achieving great heights like this. This is Sawinder Singh Baines, Sav Baines as he's known. He's been appointed as the warden of Fraser Valley Institution, a Canadian federal prison. He is the first turbaned Sikh to hold such a position. He began his career with the Correctional Service of Canada in 2002 and he's worked his way up from there. And he says he believes strongly in the work of corrections, focusing on public safety and preparing offenders for reintegration into the community. It's a massive accomplishment. Well done to him. And then as a final tribute, again, this is I love talking about Sikhs in the military and the amazing history and the historical. I mean, how many fantastic historic battles, stories of heroism, etc., that just litter the history of Sikhi, all the way back and prior to the Sikh Empire. Well, this is, for the first time in history, a Sikh has joined the Nepalese army. Now, I have a particular interest in the Nepalese army because, of course, the Gurkhas, the story of the Gurkhas in the British Army mirror the story of Sikhs in the British Army. For some reason, we still have a Gurkha regiment. Gurkhas obviously coming from Nepal. We have a Gurkha regiment in the British Army, but we don't have a Sikh regiment, which in my opinion is absolutely criminal, the fact that that is not the situation. Anyway, that's a side issue. But a Sikh has become the first Sikh to join the Nepalese army. Look how magnificent. He looks a tough old bugger, I have to say. Certainly wouldn't want to cross him on a battlefield on the in opposing trenches. He looks fantastic. So well done to this guy, Karan Singh, who is to say the first Sikh to join the Nepalese army. And he has joined, started training with the 10th group at Gorak Bak's battalion in Acham. Wow. I mean, what a salute to courage, to discipline, and of course to national pride and Sikh pride. So there you go. A wonderful note to finish the stories on. Okay, now, so the clock's mounting down. Let's zip on into our comments column. And thank you, as always, to my wonderful audience for all your contributions. Stay safe, one of our regulars. Thank you, Stay Safe, for your regular contributions. British, Canadian EU, they want to rush through the door with the trade deals. Here we go, back to what we've been talking about. We talked about Republic Day, 26th of January, Black Day as far as Sikhs are concerned. And Stay Safe's comment is really, it speaks volumes. It says, Republic Day for India, for Indians, for Hindus particularly, it's a Disneyland adventure park. It's all about show. Despite an extremely low budget, watch my podcast tomorrow when we talk about Indian economics. It's quite an eye-opener. It's a Disneyland show. It's all bells and whistles, but what actually is behind it? As Stacey says, we know what's really going on behind the scenes. Don't peek behind the curtain. Indeed. You only need to look at the story about Uttarakhand, etc., to know really what's going on in India. Look at the protests from the Sikh community round the diaspora and indeed in Amritsar with the khalistan flags, highlighting the oppression that the minorities are suffering in India. Awesome Stevie says, same country which annexed Khalistan and drained its wealth for an entire century through the use of militancy is now being hypocritical. Yes, this is the spotlight of guilt pointing on Great Britain, formerly Great Britain. Yes, indeed, this deep hypocrisy of the United Kingdom. We annexed the Sikh Empire. It's outrageous. Well, it wasn't outrageous. It was just the game of empires from the 19th century. Everybody was at it. I don't apologise for it. I wasn't there. It's just a fact of life. You can't change history. This is how empires were built and empires fell. But ultimately, and here's where I feel a responsibility as a descendant of those men that drove the empire. I feel we have a debt of honour. The only repayment that Great Britain can pay back to the Sikh community is to support the concept of Khalistan. This hypocrisy, yeah, you're right. It is our politicians that are hypocritical. It's not us. It's not the Brits. The Brits as a whole love our Sikh fellow human beings. We have a huge love for the Sikh community. You only need to ask anybody on social media their thoughts about Sikhs. Well, let's manifest that love into something more practical. Let us all unite and support the concept of Khalistan. Let's get our bloody politicians aligned with this Khalistan issue. That's what we need. So that's what it's all about. So anyway, let's move on to our next page. And again, apologies, I have to drag these on. Windows, anything to do with Microsoft, it changes on a daily basis. It never works one day to the next. Anyway, Punjab 65, thanks for this. It was a long comment. I've had to condense select bits of it just so we can cover it. But what you're basically saying, and again, it's highlighting what we've talked about in the past several times. Amit Shah has gone around the diaspora countries like Canada and the UK and told them what to do. Well, Canada, through Mark Carney, has actually told them, no, we're a democratic nation. You don't tell us what to do. But contrast that with Great Britain, United Kingdom, and for some reason, Surrender Starmer, as I call him, Surrender Starmer got on one knee and said, certainly, Mr. Modi, I will do everything that you tell me to. Now, it's all very well me pointing the finger at Starmer, but it goes back historically. Even our Conservative governments, David Cameron, bowed down to Narendra Modi. and his predecessors. Why? Absolutely. And as Punjab highlights, this quote from this MP, King's Counsel, this lawyer, basically barrister, Lucy Rigby, when it came to that story of Gurpreet Singh, who basically has been found guilty without outside any trial, any court of law, has basically been accused, assessed, believed to have been a terrorist, but not charged, sentenced, or no evidence presented, but by our Treasury and backed up by a blasted King's Counsel who should be ashamed of herself. She talked about Baba Khalsa, Baba Kali Lahar as being terrorist organisations. As Punjab says, can we name any one single incident where any of these organisations has terrorised anyone here in the UK or abroad? But for the British government, it doesn't matter. If Modi tells them Sikhs are terrorists, then the British government says, yeah, okay, we'll believe you. And they'll go and do outrageous anti-democratic, anti-rule of law acts like ostracise somebody like Gurpreet Singh and say, no, we're going to debank you. You're not going to get access to your own money. You can't. Basically, we're going to remove all your human rights because we think you're a terrorist. We can't prove it and we won't prove it. But we think you're a terrorist. We think you belong to these mythical organisations like Baba Khalsa. As Punjab says, well, and I actually asked my audience, can you send me a link to any terrorist activity, terrorist act, bomb, killing, whatever, that has been perpetrated by Baba Khalsa and Baba Akali Lahar? I might be wrong. Punjab might be wrong. But you let me know. And the final sort of sign-off on here is really to our audience here. Do you feel safe here in the UK? How safe do you feel now? And again, I just refer back to the report I've just talked about. We know how safe British Sikhs feel. They don't. They simply don't. And as he says, remember, you're just a refugee in a foreign land. And when you're in a foreign land, the rulers of that land work for your enemy. How safe do you feel? Yeah, absolutely. And the message to Gurpreet Singh is, don't worry, God is your witness. Yeah, that's an important comment. That. Thank you, Punjab, for that. That speaks volumes. Next set of comments, and start off with Robert Chapman. For Sikhs, you are guilty until proven innocent. Yes, indeed. The thumbnail there says this concept of Western law is very simple. You are innocent until proven guilty. You are by default innocent unless sufficient evidence is presented in a court of law and you are proven in a court of law to be guilty. Not anymore. If you're a Sikh, you're guilty until proven innocent, as the case of Gurpreet proves. Jas Kalam says, it's a matter of investigation now. Who's controlling this department? Don't forget, the British government department behind this outrageous act wasn't anything to do with law enforcement. It wasn't anything to do with the law or the police or even intelligence. It was the Treasury, the money men. It was the department that controls the economics of this country. They made this decision. Huh? So the question Jas Kulam raises, how many employees there are working as Indian proxies, working on Indian government's payroll? That's a good question. I don't know if there are any Indians working in the Treasury Department, but certainly it does make one wonder. Has somebody just been slipped, a little brown envelope? One has to sort of raise that question. Do you think somebody has been handed a little brown envelope by somebody from the Indian embassy? Here you go. You know what to do. This is the guy's name, Gurpreet, saying, make sure he can no longer operate. Yeah, absolutely. It does make one wonder, doesn't it? It's outrageous. As I say, I'm not going to let that story go because I think it's just an absolute moral outrage. It's a democratic outrage. It is a legal outrage. It is an outrage that even a KC, that is one of our most senior lawyers, a KC in our country can stand beside this and endorse it. I'm just utterly appalled by that. Anyway, I'm not going to rant more about that. Surjit Condell, where is James? We miss him. You're doing a great job. Well, thank you. I'm doing my best. I'm trying my best. But yeah, we all miss James. We do miss James. And regular comments from many people say we miss James. So, well, one day we hope to get James back. Please contribute to the show financially. I think the links are down below in the comment section, in the what's it section, the description section. We need to raise funds to keep the show going and to bring James back. So if you miss James, please, I'm not begging you, that's undignified, but basically do feel free to contribute to the show. It would be very much appreciated. And Avtar Dillon, one of our regulars. Hi, Avtar. Nice one, Angus. Look forward to your next video. Well, I look forward to your comments, and I do look forward to your next comments, so thank you. Do keep the comments coming. Amrik Singh says, you're playing a wonderful role. Absolutely appreciate that. You put across to the world at large the Khalistan Zindabad in appropriate parlance that all people internationally understand, especially the English audience. Absolutely. As I often say, I am here because I'm motivated by the whole concept of Khalistan. I talk about it on a daily basis. I can see no argument against the establishment of Khalistan. This is why I believe, and refer back to one of my earlier comments, we have a moral duty, obligation in the UK. And I hope that extends to people in America, Europe, down under, wherever you may be. I know you guys, I know Malaysia, I know you watch from Malaysia, amongst many other countries. All of us need to align. If you're a non-Sikhs, we all need to align with this whole concept. And particularly if you're in the UK, if you're a white guy like me, you need to wake up and understand what the British Empire did in the past. Yeah, it's done some great things, but it also done things that can be rectified through things like the establishment of Khalistan. The establishment of Khalistan ticks so many boxes in modern day strategy. We need Khalistan strategically. We need Khalistan with what's going on with global affairs to prevent World War III, essentially. Khalistan could in itself prevent World War III. This friction between India and Pakistan, as Bill Clinton admitted, that is the most likely starting point of a nuclear war, Armageddon. That's how genuine his fear was. Establish Khalistan, potentially you can stop Armageddon. That's how big it could be. So, Harry Sohi, Gurbaz, it's the march of the emojis. Thank you for your thumbs up, fist pumps, love hearts, you name it. Send them back to you guys. Thanks for that. And Aman Kul has our final sign-off of the day. Thank you, Aman Kul. Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh. Khalistan Zindabad. Indeed. Thank you for all your comments. Do keep them coming. Thanks for all your support, your loyalty. It is so much appreciated. Thanks so much for so many new names appearing in the comments. That's appreciated. It's great to see you guys. Even if you've been long-time lurkers and non-commenters, you just dip in with a quick good morning, hello, whatever. It's very much appreciated. It's great to know that you guys are out there. Do spread the word, of course. We do need more people watching the show, particularly in the Punjab and India. If you're out there, get more people to watch the show. They need to know the truth. That is the only way we can move things forward with Khalistan, etc., etc. So, don't forget you can message me directly. I do read all the emails. Thank you for those of you who have emailed. Let me know what you want me to talk about. Let me know stories that I might have missed, etc., etc. But that's it for another week. I have a podcast being uploaded tomorrow. It's a fascinating one. It is about the Indian economy. The Indian economy is not quite what you might think it is. It's quite eye-opening. So do watch my podcast being uploaded tomorrow. But that is it for another day, another week for Perspectives. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for your continued loyalty. Very much appreciated. God willing, I will see you tomorrow in the podcast, and I will see you next Monday. Have a great rest of the week, everybody.